I wish I could get well faster, but I must not think about that. This paper looks to me as if it knew the vicious influence it had. There is a recurring spot where the pattern looks like a broken neck, and two Bobo's eyes stare at you upside down. I get positively angry with the impertinence of it and the everlastingness. Up and down and sideways they crawl, and those absurd unblinking eyes are everywhere. This is an excerpt from the yellow wallpaper written by Charlotte Perkins after her personal experience with postpartum depression and her in the 19th century treatment. It narrates how the detrimental effects this treatment had on her condition, and like her, millions of people around the world and in the US are affected by postpartum depression. It's a mental disease which not only affects your mind, but your body and your ability to function in society. Today, I will inform the audience about postpartum depression treatments. Firstly, I will talk about what postpartum depression is. Secondly, I will talk about some historical and current treatments for postpartum depression. And thirdly, I will talk about the limitations and side effects of these treatments. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services defines postpartum depression as a serious mental illness involving the brain, and it affects your behavior and your physical health. According to the CDC, some of the symptoms include loss of motivation, too much eating or too little eating, too much or too little sleeping, as well as being worried about harming yourself or the baby, or feeling like a bad mother. According to the Washington Post, as of May 4, 2022, 1 in 3 people who had children from the early to mid-2020s were affected by postpartum depressions. According to the BMC research notes, March 14, 2022, some of the triggers include breastfeeding, anxiety, stress, and loss of sleep. Women and men can be affected by postpartum depression due to the stress, anxiety, and loss of sleep factors. Now that we talked about what postpartum depression is, we'll move on to talk about current and past treatments that are used for postpartum depression. Some historic treatments include therapy and antidepressants. Some discoveries made currently include the biological functions of postpartum depression. Doctors could not use a neurosteroid, which controls the brain's response to stress, to target signaling thought to be deficient in hormone-sensitive postpartum depression. And FDA recently approved a drug using this technology, Zulresso. It's a continuous infusion, as shown in this paper. As shown here, it is injected into your hand, and for Zulresso, you have to keep the infusion continuing for 60 hours or 2.5 days. It is only available through the REMS program. Only certain hospitals are allowed to give Zulresso to patients. Now that we talk about some of the treatments, we'll move on to talk about some of the limitations and side effects of these treatments. Some of the limitations include, according to the LACEN June 11, 2022, the big gap of knowledge still existing about how postpartum depression works and how to treat it. The Washington Post, May 8, 2022, also states how some medication is not useful for all people, and sometimes it doesn't work for it, which limits the amount of help that the medication can give people. Some of the side effects, according to FDA for Zulresso, include loss of consciousness and over-sedation. Now, today we've talked about what postpartum depression is. We talked about the treatments and the limitations and side effects of these treatments. As Charlotte Perkins once wrote in the yellow wallpaper, "I've got out at last," said I, "despite you and Jane, and I've pulled off most of the papers, so you can't put me back in. Medicine has advanced to a time with more precise and educated methods to treat mental illness to postpartum depression, far from when we have to isolate women and from the rest of the world entrapped in yellow wallpaper."